Here's a situation that's been happening over the last few years that gets me really annoyed. You go to a Far Cry video or a Far Cry Reddit thread and all you see in the comments is people saying, "Man, Far Cry's so repetitive and boring, why do people waste money on this trash? It's the new Call of Duty." Why are you on a Far Cry video or a Far Cry Reddit thread if you don't like the game? Go away! It doesn't make any sense to me as to why I see this so much, but I did want to address it because I wanted to kind of go over why some people do feel this way. Now, I'm going to be mainly talking about Far Cry 5 in this video, but we do need to talk about the previous Far Cry games to understand why people even say it to begin with, and I will address whether Far Cry 5 suffers the same issues or not. Let's quickly start with Far Cry 2. This was Ubisoft's first Far Cry game since the first one was made by Crytek. Now, this is a brand new engine and a brand new game, and Ubisoft didn't really have an open world formula down yet like what you see today. So it was really experimental and basically a giant tech demo. A tech demo that, in my opinion, ended up being very fun, but it had mixed opinions one way or another. Sometime later, Far Cry 3 came out and it changed a lot. This is the formula that people usually see in open world Ubisoft games, and they really sort of mastered it. A lot of people love Far Cry 3, yet hate the same exact thing, and it's a little confusing. Far Cry 2 really focused on a simulation aspect. With an open world, you could do sort of whatever you wanted to, trees growing back in real time, a lot of stuff like that, whereas Far Cry 3 focused more on the gameplay aspect. At no point in Far Cry 3 did you not know what you wanted to do gameplay-wise or what you needed to do story-wise, whereas in Far Cry 2 it just sort of felt like you got dumped into an African savanna and you didn't know what you were supposed to do or why you were there, and it didn't really explain a whole lot. There wasn't any hand-holding, and that's why I love Far Cry 2, but the general consensus was just that Far Cry 3 was better. And again, people loved Far Cry 3 when it came out. It was a new experience to them, but more importantly, people liked Voss, and that was really the hook that pulled people into Far Cry 3.
You are angry, Jason. You are angry. Okay, I get that. I get it. I mean, without family, who the fuck are we? There was a time where I'd do anything for my sister, and the first time I ever killed was for my sister. It was not enough for her. No, please. You see, the thing about our loved ones, right? Our fucking loved ones! They come and they blindside you every fucking time. So they say to me, they say, Voss, who the fuck is it going to be? Them or me? Me or them? like, you know, like they fucking think that I need to make a fucking choice. By the way, this lighter really sucks. You know, so much for poetics.
I've come to the conclusion over the last few years that people didn't actually like Far Cry 3, they just liked Voss. They played the game to see the next crazy thing Voss was going to do. And Voss was a great character, and it really did pull you in, but a lot of people just kind of seemed like they don't care about the game itself, and you can see that when people leave comments saying the game should have ended after you killed Voss. There was nothing more after that, even though there was a big island with a bunch of new guns that you didn't get a chance to use yet. And if you liked the gameplay, you wanted more of it, right? You wanted to use these new guns that you just got access to, with better enemies. Like, it was fun to me. But if you were there for Voss, you didn't care. And in my opinion, this is why we see a bunch of comments saying Far Cry 4 is just a $60 expansion of Far Cry 3, it doesn't change anything, it's just a boring, repetitive game. The reason is because it doesn't have a Voss. Pagan Min is interesting, but he isn't Voss. And the story is not written anywhere near in Far Cry 4 as it is in Far Cry 3. Now, I give a lot of shit to both these games. I don't like the story in either of them. But as poorly written as the story in Far Cry 3 is, it's obvious what's going on. In Far Cry 4, you don't really know what's happening. You might have joined some terrorist organization. You don't really have a reason to be there. It's just not written very well. But with all of that aside, as far as the game goes, purely from a gameplay perspective, without a question, Far Cry 4 is better. A lot of these small quality of life changes we see in Far Cry 5 that people love in Far Cry 5 came from Far Cry 4. A good example, a really small one that just makes the game so much better, the grappling hook. This allows you to climb over big rocks and mountains and whatnot instead of going all the way around them, turning the game into Far Drive like Far Cry 2 was. And Far Cry 4 added a ton of quality of life changes like this, but there wasn't a Voss, so people didn't care, and the game was apparently repetitive and boring, even though purely looking at it from a gameplay perspective, it's 100% better in every way. In my mind, what I'm wanting to say is, if you don't care for Far Cry, why do you expect them to change the franchise for you? You are not the target demographic, so it's not going to change. Why are you in the comments over here? Again, go away. But now we move on to the main point of this video, Far Cry 5. Does it really suffer the same problem? Is it another $60 expansion? Well, despite the comments you might have seen online, no it is not. It actually feels quite a bit different from the previous Far Cry games, while still feeling like it belongs to the same franchise. Far Cry 5 to me feels almost like a blend between Far Cry 2 and Far Cry 3. At no point do I feel pressured to do anything in Far Cry 5, but I still know what I have to do. It is truly completely open world, and despite all the jokes about Far Cry 3 being Skyrim with guns, Far Cry 5 actually does feel like Skyrim with guns. So what changes did they make to make this a thing? Why did it not feel as repetitive, quote-unquote, as the previous Far Cry games? Well, for starters, the biggest and most obvious one is that there's no towers to climb. There's no way to just see everything on the map. You're expected to simply explore and organically come across stuff. You'll see a sign that says bears might be in this area, and then it'll be marked on your map that you can hunt bears here. A lot of small stuff like this, and it really does work. They also got rid of this little mini-map in the corner and replaced it with a Skyrim-style thing up top. And it just sort of encourages you to look around everywhere. It really helps that the game graphically looks absolutely amazing, and I'm willing to say that this game looks better than any other game on the market right now. It's kind of become the new Crysis 3. It looks absolutely beautiful. The world doesn't feel like a video game world that just exists to pick up collectibles and to play a video game. It really does feel like the Montana wilderness. It just feels like a place that could really exist. Well, a place that I guess does exist, but doesn't because it's fictional in Montana. You know what I mean. The next big thing is that it doesn't reuse assets. From Far Cry 3 to Far Cry 4, a lot of people complained because the guns were the same. I personally didn't complain about this because they kept all the guns from Far Cry 3, but then they also doubled the amount of guns that they had, so there was still plenty of new guns to play with, but you also had the old guns if you wanted to use those too. Like, you had a lot of guns to play with in Far Cry 4, but there was literally just the same guns from Far Cry 3 in Far Cry 4, same textures, same animations, nothing really changed. This is not a thing in Far Cry 5. Even though some of the guns are back in Far Cry 5, completely different textures, completely different sound effects, completely different reload animations, like they're different, they feel different. I've gotten quite a few comments on my all weapons shown for Far Cry 5 of people saying it's been lazy because there's not many guns and they're just reusing previous guns, and what? Did you even watch the video? Did you play the game? Probably not. I will say there is a little bit of a lack of weapons in Far Cry 5, and that did sort of disappoint me, but what is there feels really satisfying to use. The gunplay is very different from the previous games. The previous games felt hit scan, like you point, you click, they die. In Far Cry 5 it feels almost more like Battlefield. The bullets do travel slowly, you can see them, and they do arc. I do think they travel a little bit too slowly, and it should have been more like Red Orchestra instead of Battlefield, but this is a big change, and it does feel different, and it feels so satisfying. Next, we have to talk about the story, because the story is one of the biggest complaints I had about Far Cry 3 and 4. Yes, Voss was very entertaining, but the way the story was presented is very different than the way it's presented in Far Cry 5, and in my opinion got in the way of the game. In Far Cry 3, the story missions were just linear Call of Duty style missions that just sort of interrupted the whole point of an open world game and forced you to play in a very specific way. I'll remind you of those forced stealth missions that you just instantly lost the moment you got spotted and how frustrating and annoying those were. Those don't exist in Far Cry 5, they're completely absent. In fact, almost all the tropes that we found in the previous Far Cry games are gone, with the exception of one tailing mission that had to do with Willis, and by the way, it feels so good to be able to kill Willis, because fuck Willis. I'm getting a little bit off topic. The point being, the story interrupted gameplay in both Far Cry 3 and 4, whereas in Far Cry 5 it feels, I won't say more organic, because it does kind of come across as a little bit jarring. Instead of going to a certain location on the map to talk to some NPC you probably don't care about, Far Cry 3, you will end up filling a reputation bar just by doing things in the open world. Whatever you want does not matter, your reputation bar will fill up, and this feels so much better for an open world game. No constraints, you still can do whatever you want, but there's still an obvious reason and point to you be doing whatever you want. Once this reputation bar has filled, you go to the next reputation level, and you get sort of pulled into a story mission. This is a way better presentation than the way Far Cry 3 and 4 did it. No spoilers, just making sure everyone's on the same page. I'm not going to be spoiling anything about Far Cry 5. The only complaint I have about the story in Far Cry 5 is that the ending is fucking balls and completely sucks. And I'll probably make a video about that in the future that does contain spoilers, but just as a warning, it's not very good. None of the endings are very good. That said, this is a game, so I have to judge it on the merits of the game and not just the ending, and it really doesn't take a whole lot away from the game. It's still fun, from start to end, no matter how many hours you put into it, to just mess around in this Montana wilderness, and I never feel like I'm pulled into things I don't want to do like the previous Far Cry games. On top of this, it feels reworked, it's polished beyond all belief, and it really just doesn't feel like another Far Cry game. It is very clearly Far Cry, But it's not Far Cry 3.5 again like Far Cry 4 was, if you just listened to the YouTube comments and Reddit thread that was just so negative about Far Cry before this game came out. I guess the Too Long Didn't Watch version of this video is that if you're complaining about Far Cry being the next Call of Duty, you probably didn't play Far Cry 5, and please get out of Far Cry 5 Reddit threads and Far Cry 5 videos, because no one cares about your opinion of the game. We're here because we like the game. Go away. Irrelevant fun fact time, people that are 20 years old now were born the same year the Half-Life 1 came out. And you probably feel very old like I do. Hey, thank you guys for watching this video, and a quick thanks to everyone over on my Patreon, or people that do the GogBox thing, or people that help and give donations over on Twitch. Without all you guys, my job would not really be obtainable right now. Huge thanks to you guys. If you really like this channel, consider joining them over on my Patreon or on one of these links on the screen. Peace.